I think I've done enough deer watching. Do the deer live up to the hype? Shikanoko Nokonoko Koshitantan, or My Dear Friend Nokotan, is not a bad show, but it is not doing enough for me. Simply put, this is a pure comedy that is not super funny often enough for me to keep sitting through the full thing. The main duo alone is not enough to carry the lackluster side characters, the slower pace, and its tropey aspects. I have enjoyed it, but it does not work as well for me as I had hoped going in. There will be spoilers going forward. So I will be using Nichijou as a recurring point of comparison. Not just because the community had already been doing that a lot, but also because Nichijou is my personal favorite pure comedy anime. The show suffers a bit from overhype. I think the blame is split partially between the show itself promoting the meme aspects and the community getting very wrapped up in these individual, meme hyped up moments. People were calling it the second coming of Nichijou, which is an extremely high bar to encourage people to compare it to. Like you're not doing it any favors by comparing it to what I think most people would agree is the greatest comedy anime ever made. I'm sure not literally everyone thinks that, but that is a very widespread opinion. Nichijou consistently kept me engaged and laughing so often that my stomach got sore, even on rewatches. But Shikanoko does not do this. It has some moments that are absolutely Nichijou level and are really, really great. But there are not enough of them with too much time in between those really good moments. So I will admit to sounding pretty harsh here, but I promise I do not think Shikanoko is an objectively bad show and or that you're not allowed to enjoy it or anything along those lines. For me, it is just not good enough when there's so much other purely comedic content available, like for easy access, that I don't really want to sit through something that's not consistently really funny. So for me, pure comedies need to be extremely funny to be worth watching. So I'm talking about the types of shows like this and like Nichijou that are entirely focused on telling jokes. I enjoy comedy, but I generally need a good story, characters, and other strong aspects alongside it. I like a more well-rounded experience. There are some pure comedies that I've watched and really enjoyed over the years, like Nichijou, Asobi Asobase, Azumanga Dao, and Daily Life of High School Boys. It's also worth noting, when it comes to the consumption of funny content, that we have a wealth of it available to us consistently now through sources like YouTube and other social media platforms. I can get my funny fix when I just want something to make me laugh pretty easily by going on YouTube or something else. And speaking of YouTube, that is also one way to enjoy parts of anime without watching the full thing. For a comedy to be worth sitting through in its entirety, you need to keep the great jokes coming at a fast pace, or have the slower jokes have a really good payoff and be worth it in the end, that you feel like it was worth sitting through. This is not a new thing. Nichijou accomplishes this extremely well, pumping out funny joke after funny joke, sometimes even feeling at a ridiculous pace. And the slower moments have really great build up to moments that are definitely worth it and well worth the wait. With Nichijou, I feel like you'd miss out on a lot of great stuff by just looking for the best of the latest episode on YouTube or another social media platform, or just looking at like specific character compilations, stuff like that. But with Shikanoko, I don't feel there is enough in between the great moments. So yeah, like I said, I will give it props for some of the really great moments. If every scene was on the level of moments like the classroom entrance, getting kicked out of heaven, and the exploding horn, then yes, we could absolutely compare it to Nichijou. Those are those moments I mentioned that I do think actually live up to that and are just really great comedy. But the comedy is not nearly as fast-paced as Nichijou, with there being a lot more time in between each top tier bit. So on the point of characters, they're the most important aspect of a story for me if we just look at each individual aspect of what a media thing can do. And for me, it's the characters. And Shikanoko just does not have a great cast outside of the main two. Toriko and Noko are a great comedy duo. They are fantastic. The comedy is at its best when it focuses on them and their solid bokeh and tsukomi routine. Toriko, being an ex-delinquent with a reputation to uphold, gives her more to fuel her actions and her reactions, which are good for bits. Noko is super silly and random with a really strong endearing quality to her. Her absurdism bounces off Toriko well and allows for plenty of shenanigans for Toriko to react to. This is like, I would say, what the core thing of Shikanoko is. The voice acting for both of them is also excellent, and is important for the hilarity of their scenes. But these two can only carry so much of a full season of 20-minute episodes. And when it brings in the other characters, the quality of the comedy just completely nosedives for me. Anko has a sister complex. Meme likes rice and is gung-ho about the deer stuff. That's all the first two characters to be introduced after the main duo have, in my opinion. That's it. They are just way oversimplified characters that just have these very minute bits they do that are just not very funny and just there's not much to work with. And I think that really shows. Like, it feels like the staff knew going into this, because I feel like those two barely even did anything after their introductory episodes. And what they do have is just not that funny. I just don't find the sitcom stuff funny, and that is basically Anko's entire character, based on what we see in the first 6 episodes. She lusts after her sister and is obsessed with her sister. That's her whole person. If you don't find sitcom jokes funny, then to me she's just a nothing character. And with Meme, I don't really get what she does other than enable Noko and eat rice. She isn't bringing enough to scenes with her involved, just like Anko. And the other characters that they got into in these 6 episodes are the student council members, who aren't terrible. I wouldn't say they're quite as bad, especially considering the limited time that I spent with them, but they still feel just more average and bland. The stuff involving Neko and the student council members is like, it's fine, but it doesn't carry the more unique and explosive energy that the main duo has. None of them are characters that I feel like I've never seen before. And this applies to the sitcom stuff too. Over the years, I've seen these tropes in these characters plenty of times. So maybe earlier in my life, I would have enjoyed this more. Maybe a younger or newer anime viewer who hasn't seen sitcom characters, for example, may find the sister really funny. And if that's the case, that's totally valid. I'm not saying that my basis and feelings on comedy totally eclipses everything, and that's what everyone should feel. But for me, it's just not doing enough. If people are enjoying this as much as I enjoyed Nichijou when I watched it for the first time many years ago, then props to them, props to you if you're one of them. I'm all for people enjoying things even when I don't. But for me, outside the main duo, the characters are just not good, and it just doesn't make for good comedy. And for me, that really, really brings things down. So yeah, to continue the Nichijou comparison using the characters, imagine watching Nichijou, but you only found Yuko and Mio, or Hakase and Nano funny. Think of it within that perspective. Within where you just like these two characters and their bits they do together, and the rest you think is boring. That's how I feel watching this. Nichijou would be so much worse, and you would feel inclined to just look up moments of your favorite duo rather than sitting through all of it. And that's how I feel with this. Nichijou has a wide cast of hilarious characters and recurring jokes that keep it fresh and laughing constantly. But every time Shikanoko deviates from Noko and Toriko, it just isn't very good. A lot of this may come down to the longer runtime of anime compared to the manga, leading to some scenes being stretched. And for me, I think that just does not help the comedy if that is what happens. Nichijou was able to navigate this well. I've read a lot of the manga as well as watched the anime, and I think it has no issues with this whatsoever, but Shikanoko absolutely does. So some people, I think, can try to make this about short attention spans, ruining longer form comedy or just comedy that is slower. But in my opinion, this is an overgeneralization that I think people are using the low. I'm not denying the shortening of attention spans. That absolutely is a thing. But you can't use that as just a catch-all for people criticizing everything that isn't short. That's just not true. And at least with my case, I know that does not apply to me. If you haven't seen enough of my work and my personality to tell, slice of life is my favorite genre. It's my favorite type of anime and manga. I love shows that take their time to build up the things with no bright, flashy keys jingling in my face to keep my attention constantly. These series that aren't constantly funny or flashy in some other way are doing other appealing stuff in between those big moments that are building to something. Like I mentioned, more well-rounded experience. They're telling a story, establishing characters, expanding a world, etc. But Shikanoko doesn't have any of that for me. It is a pure comedy, and it's clearly is that, and is trying to be that. It's not trying to be one of these things. But by not doing those things and not being strong enough in the one thing that you're doing, it just ends up being a more boring experience. If Shikanoko just wants to be funny, then that's fine. But then when it is failing at being funny, it feels like it's accomplishing nothing. And that's what can make it feel boring. Like the Toshi Torako Championship in episode 2 is an example where things felt drawn out. Torako being exposed and embarrassed worked for a bit, but then it went on for like 4 whole minutes. It was not funny enough to be dragged out like that, and just felt repetitive. It just wasn't that fun. Based on gags going on too long, you'd think episode 6, which is where I stopped, would work better for me, as it has a lot of short gags. But I just didn't find all those that funny either, and I feel like that kind of was the moment that broke the straw, because it's just this is what I thought maybe it would make it work better, but it just didn't work for me in that sense either. And going back to Nichijou felt perfectly paced. Every single gag felt like it lasted exactly as long as it needed to, in order to be as funny as possible. Shikanoko just does not feel as well balanced, and that really brings down the experience as per the reasons I've specified. So, to close things out, I will be dropping the Shikanoko anime. It does succeed at being funny through its solid main duo, but it's not funny often enough as I need for pure comedy. Because that's the thing I like to make explicitly clear. I'm not saying that Shikanoko is not funny at all. I'm not saying the anime completely fails at being funny. It's just minutes. There are sometimes minutes in between moments where it is really funny. And that time, it's not that good. It's not really engaging. So it has to feel, it's about the time. It's about the time. Taking the time to watch a 20-minute episode, I don't want to be laughing once every like 4 or 5 minutes, when I could go and watch something else on YouTube something on YouTube or another comedy, or a series that has comedy alongside other things, and I will be consistently more engaged. If you want to keep people engaged, you have to do and you only want to do one thing, you have to do that one thing really well. And that one thing, it is not doing well enough. I do still have some liking for this show, and I do want to see it succeed. And I'm glad that a lot of people are really enjoying it. But I think I'll be sticking to watching clips instead, and I think I'm going to check out the manga as well, and see if maybe it works better there. Because like I said, I brought up how adaptations often end up stretching things and how that can be an issue. So I'm going to give the manga a try and see if that jives better with me. So if I end up having any really strong feelings on that after returning to it, I may write and make a video on it again. So if you would want to potentially look at that, you could follow. And if you want to see anything else I talk about anime and manga in general, and do reviews, and I do more so content like analysis and stuff like that around anime, manga, and other media. So yeah, you can check that out if you want. Follow, like, subscribe, blah, blah, blah. I'm glad a lot of people are enjoying this show. You're valid if you do like it, but it's just not enough for me. If this is your Nichijou, then all the power to you, but this does not stand up to Nichijou at all for me. It's okay, just not good enough. And I'll stop myself from just continuing to ramble and say thank you very much for listening. And you can check out my website where I originally wrote about this that I'm basing this video on in the description. Thank you.